It's time. It's officially October, which means it's finally time to start planning for Halloween. This year, I decided to turn myself into a vintage-inspired chainmail-clad bat. I've never actually incorporated chainmail into a full costume. I've always just made Halloween-themed items, so I really want to make two pieces that stand out as focal points. The first thing that I want to make is a headpiece with big bat ears. The second chainmail thing that I want to make is a bat mask. I've seen a lot of different versions of these, from vintage pieces to runway accessories, so I kind of want to make an amalgamation of these and make something that's my own. As for what I want to sew, I don't think this costume would be complete without a giant pair of bat wings. I've seen so many dramatic and beautiful examples in all the references that I've found, so that is number one on my list. I'm ready to get started. Let's go. So I spent last night doing ring prep, which basically just means I made a giant pile of open rings and a giant pile of closed rings in order to get ready to start mailing. It took me forever, but I didn't really mind because it gave me a chance to review the ancient texts, as it were. But now I'm ready to start planning the headpiece. To draft my pattern, I used the tried and true method that I see all of the cosplayers that I watch on YouTube use, wrapping yourself in plastic wrap. I'd never tried this before, but it was so easy and I just had a great time. After I was all wrapped up, I covered everything in a layer of painter's tape. I definitely used way too much plastic wrap, which ended up making my pattern super big, but we'll deal with that later. Then I marked out where the little point at the front would be and where I needed to make space for my ears. Next, I finished planning out the pattern and cut everything out until I was left with all of the pieces of my soon-to-be hat. I just did a fabric stash search and I have so much black fabric, but I'm gonna use this really thick curtain that I found for the hat. I haven't sewn in like a year, so I'm kind of nervous. So I'm gonna make a mock-up with a fitted sheet that I found and see how that goes before I cut into this fabric. All in all, this was a great first draft. However, at this point, I did not see the vision as much as I tried to force myself to. I have to fix the point here because it kind of all gathers right there, and I can't tell if I want to cut more off the back. It looks cute when the ears are like on it. Something's wrong with it. I just can't really tell what it is yet. I'm gonna keep futzing with this and I'll check in later. And futzed I did. I made a few adjustments, including taking a bit off the back and fixing that weird point. I then carefully cut out all the pieces to draft a brand new pattern. I made a second mock-up that I actually was happy with and decided that I was ready to dig into the hat fabric. I don't know what it is about sewing that makes me kind of nervous. I think it might be because I'm so new to it. Whenever I'm learning something, I always want to know everything right away. I'm kind of impatient about learning skills. I just never want to get things wrong. But I guess that's the whole point of learning, isn't it? After I had the top piece and the lining complete, I decided that I wanted to tie a ribbon around my neck to hold it in place. So I marked out where the ribbon would go and then pinned both pieces inside out with the ribbon inside. Once everything was pinned, I sewed both pieces together along the bottom edge and then flipped everything right side out. Now that I'm happy with how the headpiece is coming out, I can move on to the ears. I've been hoarding this foam that they used when they shipped my 3D printer, so I'm gonna use that as the base of the ears and then wrap that in the same fabric that I used for the headpiece and then cover everything in chainmail. Wish me luck. First things first, I had to figure out the proper shape. I really want these to read as bat ears and not cat ears because there's a fine line between the two. Once I had the shape nailed down, I made a paper pattern to test the size of the ears before cutting into the foam. Then I transfer the pattern onto the foam and cut out the pieces. At this point, I was happy with the shape, but I wanted the ears to be a bit more three-dimensional, so I used the leftover foam scraps to bulk them up. I'm hoping that adding this extra thickness will stop the ears from flopping around once they're attached to the headpiece. So I let the glue dry overnight, and they're perfect. I love them so much. I really am so happy with how they turned out. I did want them to look really big. I want them to look exaggerated, and they do. So as you can see, I bulked up the back a bunch just to give it an extra shape. And I also made it thick enough so that it won't fall down because it's gonna be heavy because I'm gonna cover it in chainmail. And then the front, I just added this little kind of extra bit of shaping. I know the details aren't going to show up too much, but I do want it to kind of have the right shape. So the plan for today is to get these wrapped in fabric, and my goal is to start mailing today. I would love to get these done. Let's get started. I started by wrapping the ears in the sheet that I used before. I tried to save myself a little bit of hand sewing, so I used glue, and oh boy, was it a sensory nightmare. It ended up taking probably the same amount of time as hand sewing because I had to wait for the glue to dry, but that's okay because while I was waiting, I was able to get the top layer of fabric ready to be sewn on as soon as the glue was set. Once the glue was fully dry, I pinned down the fabric and hand-stitched everything into place. Good morning. It's about 7 a.m. I have a super long day of mailing ahead of me. It's very cold in Maine today, so I'm gonna spend the day tucked in on my couch, watching movies, and getting the headpiece done. Once the mail was prepped and ready, I measured strips of European 4-in-1 to match the ear pattern. Then I wove them into a sheet and attached them to the ear, making sure to keep the seam hidden along the edges. It's almost 7:30 now. I got one ear done. I'm gonna call it a night. Even though I've been doing chainmail for the past 5 years, I still always underestimate how much time something's gonna take. I'm probably gonna be working on this for the next 3 or 4 days. Good night. I spent the next day repeating the entire process for the second ear and then secured the mail in place by sewing it directly to the fabric. Then I used an ungodly amount of hot glue to attach the ears to the headpiece. All that was left was to add chainmail to the rest of the headpiece. This section was also sewn in place and then secured to the ears with extra jump rings. And with that, the headpiece is done. We are officially 1 week until Halloween, and I don't know about you, but I definitely need a chainmail break, so we're gonna make some wings. Before we start anything, I want to take you back in time to a recent visit to my own personal utopia, also known as Savers. While I was there, I found these beautiful lace curtains, and I'm actually not gonna alter them too much because they already have this really nice wing shape, and I also want to be able to reuse them as curtains in the future. However, I do have to dye them black, so let's see how that goes. I promise I followed all the directions, but this did not work. At first, I didn't know what kind of fabric I was working with until I found a little surprise. What is that? Oh, there's a tag on it? What are you made of? 100% polyester. Okay, should have known. Open your freaking eyes, dummy. I'm sure it's gonna be fine. I'm not worried about it. I probably should have been worried about it because after letting the dye sit for over an hour, the fabric was still just a light gray. I just went out and I bought the right dye, so take 2. I guess the second time was the charm because these came out looking so good. I can't believe how well that worked. That was so much fun. I'm gonna dye all of my stuff now. Even though I got it wrong the first time, like, it was super easy. 10 out of 10. Big fan. The plan is to use 4 curtains and kind of make them into just big sleeves. I'm not 100% sure how I want to do the closure yet at the front. I'm just kind of winging it. I guess I'll get started now. So I just finished sewing up the wings, and unfortunately they are not laying in the way that I really want them to. Since I don't want to cut these, it does kind of limit what I can do. So I ended up just sewing along the top of my arms and then down the back just to kind of make it one big circle in the hopes that I could just tie it in the front. But I think I'm going to pivot and seam rip the back and just kind of try to make 2 separate wings. If all else fails, I'm just going to sew the back up again and just deal with it. But let's see what we can come up with today. I just got an idea. I think I'm gonna try to make some sort of a collar or a neck piece that I can attach the wings onto. Let me figure it out. After a quick practice mock-up, I immediately got to work drafting the pattern. I basically used the same steps that you'd use for a circle skirt, but obviously neck-sized. And then I just added little wing-shaped cutouts along the edge. I think that looks really good. Okay, wait, I'm really happy with this version. For just like a few extra hours of work, I feel like it makes such a huge difference. Now that I have this collar piece, it kind of feels more like a capelet rather than like a shawl. I think it's so much better. Is it perfect? No. Is it fine? Yes. Especially because I am gonna take it apart at some point. You know, I don't want to become too attached. Pretty. I'm feeling like completely rejuvenated now. The problem is now I'm not gonna want to take it apart. All right, let's get back to it. While I was resewing the curtains, I added 2 more panels for some extra swishability and then stitched them all to the collar. Once the collar was attached and the wings were all sewn together, I added a hook and eye fastening to the front and the back cape was complete. We have made it to the final accessory, which is, of course, the mask. My plan for construction is to build off a pair of sunglasses that I found. I'm probably gonna take the lenses out and just use it as a frame and then attach wire to make the actual shape. I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna work. I have hope and audacity, so I think that's all I need. I started the mask process by making a few paper drafts to decide on the size and shape. I tried my best to make it the least Batman-esque as possible, but that was actually a much more difficult task than I'd ever realized. Once I settled on the shape, I prepped the glasses by popping out the lenses, cutting off the bottoms, and sanding down the edges. After drilling holes for the wire, I got started on matching the wire base to my design. I decided to wrap the wire in yarn. This way, I had something to sew the chainmail to keep it in place. After adding the chainmail, I felt that the mask was a little bland, so I dug into my grandmother's old jewelry making stash to find some accoutrements to add on. Once I was satisfied with all the extra adornments, we were finally ready to put everything together for the grand reveal. This project was so much fun. I loved that I got the chance to make some chainmail things and also sew some stuff. I am trying to expand my skill set, so it was nice to have a couple extra things to practice on. And I had a lot of fun. I really love doing this stuff. I have such a blast. The headpiece came out exactly like I imagined it. That's the thing that I put the most thought and effort and time into. I spent about 2 or 3 weeks working on it. I think I probably bit off a little bit more than I could chew when it came to the mask. As much as I liked the concept of what I made, I don't think I put as much effort into it as I really should have. But maybe I'll make something like that again in the future and try to update it. I think that might be fun. The capelet shawl thing, I love. Yeah, all in all, big fan of everything that I made. I even enjoyed making my little set. I went out and I found these velvet curtains, and thankfully I already have a huge stockpile of candelabras, so. Thank you for joining me once again. I think it's so cool that I get to do this. And I'm honored that you chose to be here along with me. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a safe and happy Halloween.